Commissioner Osland is absent this evening, and Student Commissioner Chawla. Alrighty, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance. Can I request our Commissioner Lopez Lucy to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Item number 3, Commission Business, Crow Canyon Gardens Renovation Project Phasing. Recommendation, review the proposed phasing for the Crow Canyon Garden renovation projects and approve the plan for or recommend changes. Presented by Parks and Community Services Director Hattie Hinman and Sarah Sutton, Place Work Principal.
All righty. Well, I am really pleased to be able to come back to the commission with forward progress on Crow Canyon Gardens. We have several people here this evening to help present and answer questions about the phasing of the project. So I'm pleased to introduce, you guys can wave, Spence Kaler, Associate, and Sarah Sutton, Principal from PlaceWorks, right there in the front row. And next to them, Greg Yanito, Senior Planner and Project Manager from Page and Turnbull. In addition, we also have several staff present from both Public Works and Parks and Community Services. They're all here in support of the project and as resources. If as we move through the presentation, you have questions, we've got the Brain Trust here ready to help. So everyone here has spent a lot of time and energy diving into the different phases of this project and developing this detailed included in the staff report and presentation. I had to bring the giant binder too. And I just in case anybody wants to talk about the background for Crow Canyon Gardens, this binder are all of the various formal packets and meetings that we've had on Crow Canyon Gardens. This project's been going for a long time, and there's been a lot of discussion, community input, community workshops, opportunities for people to get involved. So if anybody ever really needs and wants to see the history, I'm perfectly willing to let you borrow my binder. So this meeting tonight is specifically about the phasing for this project. So we're going to attempt this evening to confirm what's in each phase. And then that phasing recommendation will allow staff to project what is needed in next year's CIP budget, as well as to forecast what might be needed in the next 5 years of CIP budgets. So this is kind of your first piece of it, and we need this piece in order to inform the second piece. So in March, staff will be bringing the CIP to the commission for consideration. And at that point, you'll have the opportunity to talk through the additional money needed for Crow Canyon Gardens. And you'll have that opportunity to consider and then balance that against all the other competing demands for dollars. But today is just about identifying which phases those should be in so that we can then bring you a CIP process that has the costs in it. So we have a brief PowerPoint, which you can see, that will bring everyone up to speed on where we're at. I'm going to just cover the background briefly and the CIP, and then I'm going to hand it off to Sarah with PlaceWorks to walk you through the phases and what specifically is included in each phase. And then once we get through all that, we'll answer your clarifying questions, take public comment, and then dive into your thoughts on phases. So let's kind of kick this off with the recommended action, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to have to cheat on my sheet so I can follow it, so I can see it. Staff is recommending that the Parks and Community Services Commission review the proposed phasing for the Crow Canyon Garden renovation project, approve the plan, and or recommend changes to the proposed phases. So when we look at the background of the project, and the first two, I think you know, Crow Canyon Garden features a meadow, community garden allotment, demonstration gardens associated with the Old Muds restaurant, access to the creek, and various other structures. Major renovations are needed to bring the park up to current standards and make it more inviting and accessible for use by the public. Nobody disagrees about that. And the orange bullet on here, I think, is the one that the commission was quite strong in their recommendation on. And this is that improvements should reflect the site's natural setting, connect with the landscape environment and adjacent creek, and help maintain a serene environment where residents can connect and engage with nature. That particular bullet is really important to keep in mind, as that was the vision for the park by both the commission and the city council. And it really is what has driven the design choices and everything else that you have in the park, that it be this unique and special place like no other park in the city, that you do have this opportunity to really resonate and connect with nature. And then I think, as you know, the city council directed staff to save one room of the structure and other significant features so that we could interpret the history of the site and keep the focus on the park, on nature and gardening, and be able to interpret that farm to table concept that was what MUDS was in its heyday. So when you look at this, this is the approved plan that you approved last year on 10/3/23. It's beautiful. It has a vision for the park that includes a much better pathway system, that has meadows and a nature play area, access to the creek, renovated parking, beautiful shade structures over the in 2 places in the park, as well as bathrooms and expanded community garden beds. So just so you have a reminder of this is where we're headed, but then how do we get there? Well, there's a lot to do. So we have to look at our CIP budget to get there. So currently, so right now, we have in money, cash, whatever you want to say, $517,000 in that CIP, which is adequate to complete most of the design, evaluation, investigations, preparation of the demolition bid package, and demolition related to reuse of the buildings. So we have that. That's already done. The fiscal year 24-25 CIP, which is what got approved last year, included additional funds of 1.7 million. That money is approved and allocated. So we don't have to ask for that money again. That money is there ready to go, but we don't have the funds yet collected. So the use of those particular 1.7 was contingent on receiving the funds from development projects that were originally anticipated to come in 24-25, but have not. So due to those delays in development, and also a new assembly bill, which has kind of muddied the water on this, it changed the timing of when fees are collected. The anticipated funds are not available for this project. That assembly bill basically made it so that right now we collect fees when the developer pulls the permit for a building. Great, we collect the fees, off we go. But now, because of this assembly bill, they are making it so you collect the fees at occupancy. So when you think of residential development, there's a long time between when you pull a permit to build a building and somebody actually moves in. It's a little bit better in one sense for Crow Canyon Gardens because it's already a CIP project. We already have funds allocated. So it is our understanding that we would still be allowed to collect some of these funds up front. But I mention it because I think it's an important piece as we look at the CIP as a whole and we look at budgeting as a whole. So this is going to cause a little bit of a delay for us. But development fees will continue to be collected, and additional funds needed to complete the first phase of the project actually may be available in 25-26 as we're collecting them right now. Since we've already got that first 517, we're only about 150,000 shy, and very likely by the time we get to that space, we'll actually have collected those funds. They're already approved. So it may not be a problem, but we won't know that until we get to that particular part. So if the funds are not available, that remaining 150,000 for phase 1 could be allocated or loaned from our city's public art beautification fund, since we know we'll get the money back, or we could just reduce the scope of that first phase and not complete it until the funds are available. So let's get on to the really exciting part. And this is the phasing that PlaceWorks, our on-call consultant, has come up with. PlaceWorks has worked with this project now for quite some time. So I think they're excited to see us get going on it. So let me hand it off to you, Sarah. Is your button on?
I see a green light. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor and council and all the staff and everybody who's here, we are really thrilled to be here to present this next phase for this project. You're going to need another binder. We're just
Yeah.
getting started, right? I'm Sarah Sutton. I'm a landscape architect. I have very fond memories of the MUDS building. I lived in the area. I worked on a lot of your parks in the 80s. And we'd often go to lunch after a meeting and sit, and that was the first time I had fresh organic flowers on top of my salad. And the fact that all the vegetables were from that garden, it was my first farm to table experience. And in addition, my son, who's now much older, participated in Carrie Marshall's summer camp program for many years down by the creek. And I told him when I was working on this project, he says, "Oh, I love that creek. I just love that park." So I'm bringing a lot of personal enthusiasm in addition to just, it's a wonderful project. And I just want to mention that Spence Kaler is the project manager and has been from its inception. So his name is all over those documents, and he has a lot of history, and he's the person who's bringing the project together, and I'm the principal overseeing, and I'm just really lucky to have him on board. And Greg Unito as one of the two main architects looking so closely at the MUDS building. So at the end of my presentation, I'm going to turn to them and say, did I forget anything? And then we're all here to answer your questions. So phase one, we did look at, okay, what can we do first? And the building is the heart of the project. So that's been stated, and we all agree. And so that's the epicenter. And then the phases will expand in a logical sequence to first focus on the building. And phase one is step one. We need to clean it up. We need to take things down in a way that just can't be saved. We need to save what can be. There's a detailed cataloging that needs to happen now. It was conceptual at the master plan. And this particular phase is front-loaded with fees because we need structural and geotech and hazmat services, all the things that you're required to do for a building of this sort in this condition, so that we can be sure moving forward, we take down the parts that need to come down. We know how to cut the seams and where the building won't just, remaining jewel box won't just fall down. And so that it will include site assessment, tests. I mentioned the geotech and all, and what to salvage. And then there's a process that Greg can explain called a basis of design, which is key to any successful building, which is we all agree this is what the building needs to be and this is how we're going to do it. It's much more than a master plan, and buildings are very detailed projects in themselves. In addition, there will not be any construction per se. It will be to, what did you call it, mothball or close it up. We hope we'd have enough money to actually take it to at least having the building and the kitchen. But it looks like this is the first phase, and it's a logical stopping point to then say, okay, now we know what the game plan is. If the money comes in, we'll roll right into the next phase, which would be phase two. If it's not, the building will be closed and hardened off and weatherproofed, and we'll get rid of all the debris and clean the site up. So that's a good first step. So let's move on to phase two. This is where you get a building, and it will involve taking the basis of design into schematic design and looking at how it's all going to come together in much more detailed cost estimates, plan specifications and estimates, the PS&E, and where there will be, the jewel box will be the room that's preserved. There'll be an outdoor kitchen, and the restroom would be included in phase two, as well as we need to relocate the PG&E transformer. It's just in the wrong place now for what we want to do. And there will be a little bit of cleanup around the building itself, but the idea would be is we could at least establish a way that maybe you can bring people in on special events and control their access, because we won't have done any site work yet. But then the building will be complete. Then phase three, now that the building is complete, we'll expand beyond to work around the building itself to complete the accessibility to the building, get that parking lot figured out where the creek is eroding away, and what can we do in the short term. It doesn't include repairing that creek and how it's falling down, although what we've discovered in the investigation is there is a pipe coming out that's draining water and eroding that bank. If that can be addressed by Public Works even, that will lessen any more erosion and protect the the parking lot until we have the ability to do something with it. But we would define the parking lot. There's an entry arch we have designated to welcome you into the space. ADA connections at least have a way for people who want to come and need a way to navigate into the building with an accessible path. There'll be a limited path that way, not the entire area. And some planting around the building. And at this point, the main service that we are going to add then is this is where we're going to do the detailed survey of the entire site. The master plan was completed with an old survey document that was prepared years ago. And then to do the rest of the park, we had to use LiDAR satellite data and try to overlap it and make it fit. And it was okay for what we were doing in the master plan, but moving forward beyond the building phase, we need a detailed survey with spot elevation so we can check the grading, we can check the drainage, make sure those pathways going up to that building are meeting the ADA requirements. And then that becomes an accurate base for all future building. So at the end of phase 3, we have the building and a little more. Phase 4 is when we would focus on building out the rest of the park, all those wonderful amenities and keeping it natural, keeping it accessible, walking paths for people to circle the entire park, experience the creek edge, renovations to the garden plots. We're showing a number of new additional, what do they call them in England? They call them, anyway, I'm going off target here. And there'll be irrigation and the nature play area over by the other parking lot, shaded picnic. There'll be a lovely, we've planned a big shade structure over by the public gardens, the community gardens, that actually has a bit of a arched roof, very similar to the mud structure. So there'll be a connection visually with that. And then another detail would be, in addition to more shade and places for people to sit and picnic, this is where we'd like to address the entryway. If you've never been to the park before, it's very confusing when you turn off of Crow Canyon Road onto Park Place and the boardwalk corner, and you see sheds. And you might see a sign, and you don't really know which way you want to go. And that really needs to be welcome to Crow Canyon Gardens. And that will be something we can do at that point to really highlight what a special place it is. And finally, there's been a lot of interest. As I said, my son didn't mind walking on the dirt paths going down to the creek edge, but people want to get down to the creek. And that's something that I think would be a wonderful thing to do. It will require structural engineering. It'll require additional geotech to make sure whatever we put in will stay on the bank. And there'll be some reports that we need to do and make sure that we're addressing the creek itself and the biology. So we're thinking that one is going to be the last thing that gets done. But there are lovely examples of that, and that'd be a great crown on the end of the project. So the next slide shows, we have a map over the colors. Phase 1, the purple is 1 and 2. So we're really staying focused on the building. Then 3 shows on both sides of the building how we'll expand out to address the parking and accessibility from the parking to the building. Phase 4 is the lighter green that covers most of the park across the middle there, and then that tan is the phase 5. So at this point, oh, there's one more slide. Here's a summary of the costs that were presented by phase. And the phase 1 and 2, we actually really did some digging, and we got into the weeds in that and used real cost spreadsheets to try to make sure we were thinking of everything, so we can make sure we can bring those in on that budget number. But then for phase 3, 4, and 5, we used more square footage costs, opinion of probable costs, similar projects. And then we've also added, knowing this is going to happen in phases, each of these includes a 5% escalation per year. So as the costs go up, there's a built-in escalation. And I just have one caveat. This is not political, it's just reality. With the current administration and some of the plans to make some shifts in our economy and our connections with suppliers overseas, we don't know. And the General Contractors Association has commented already that construction costs, they always go up, but we just don't know what the impact will be. So we just cross our fingers and be nimble and creative as we move forward. So we're ready for questions and comments, but first I just wanted to turn, is there anything I missed that you can think of? I was going on and on. Okay, great. Well, if you have any questions, especially with about the building and what's involved in that, Greg is here to answer that.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. So let's go with the commission clarifying questions first. Commissioner Lopez Lucy.
Yes, I have a question. You keep referring to the building. And I'm a person that's been on this commission for a long time and probably half of that book that she has. As my understanding, it wasn't to be a building, but this was just supposed to be a small place that we can have called the Jewel Room. But you keep referring it to building, which says to me, you're going to keep the structure and everything. So that to me was a little confusing when you're doing that. So when you say building,
That is
tells me
actually,
that it's a building and not a small room, that which I thought that was agreed upon only to do, because originally the park commission had voted unanimously to have the building completely taken down.
I'm glad you brought that up. We should have had our picture. I forgot that to just to show you the lovely rendering we have. It's in the master plan document. Yes, the intent was there'll be a roof. It'll be open air. Greg can answer more about how we're thinking, well, how do you secure that? Do you have barn doors? Do you have, what do you do so people can come and go? Mostly open air, outdoor kitchen, moving. And the one structure within the building, MUD's building itself, is the room they're calling the Jewel Box, which is it was one of the private little dining areas. It's a very small room that's a little bit lower elevation. And that was going to remain intact, but the rest around the building, it's mainly a glorified pergola, if you will. It's a roofed area within the interior, try to reflect the detailing that was in the building and possibly reuse some of the detailing inside on the underside of the roof.
That wasn't my understanding of what it was going to be.
Okay,
Was with that, whatever, because to me that adds cost to it and wasn't the original intent. I didn't believe, or that was my opinion from being.
Can I help you out a little bit? I think it's terminology that's throwing everybody off a little bit, maybe, because the city council directed the Jewel Box. You remember that?
Yes.
The commission's original viewpoint was that we have a shade structure that would copy the ceiling of MUDs. So you would have this feeling of MUDs, and all the renderings in the master plan that was approved include that concept. So it is a shade structure, open air, outdoor kitchen, and one room, the Jewel Box. That's what's in the master plan.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions?
Well, Kathy has answered some of my questions because I wanted to know when we could expect the future money from developers, but you're saying that should be coming in this year.
We'll see. Well, there's a lot of development. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
noticed, but there's a lot of development
Yes.
going on in San Ramon. And so over the next several years, there are literally millions of dollars coming into our development fund. So we will have enough money to complete this project if it's the desire of the commission and the city council to complete all of the phases. That 150,000, we're pretty we just don't want to say for sure, but we're pretty confident by the time after we've spent the 517 we have, that 150 will have come in because it's coming in every day. That next bump, that one, I'm not sure exactly when we'll get that next.
The 1,700 or something.
Yeah, that one I'm not positive on, but when they come with the CIP, they're liable to have a better estimate again of when the money we think is coming in, but it is based on the permit. So it's a little hard to judge. And if they don't pull the permit, they don't move forward with the development, then the fees don't come in, but they are projects that are approved and they will come in eventually.
That money will go right into the CIP capital budget for the garden.
Yeah,
That comes
the
in.
part that's already approved in the CIP, that's approved allocated funds. So as soon as the money comes in, it's already dedicated to these
Dedicated.
projects and specifically to Crow Canyon Gardens. So it will go straight into that fund for that project, as well as the other projects that are on hold.
Anything else?
Well, she answered some of my questions that I had about the Hayes mat evaluation and et cetera, but I see that you do need that. But I thought we had had some of these things done in the past, but I guess not.
That one I'm not positive on. So I don't know if some of the testing and some of the analysis that has been done will be duplicated. I think that's what Carol's asking.
Uh-huh. Can you go to the mic?
Sure. Good evening. Hi. I think I can help explain. We did have a demolition estimate done early in the process of planning documents, but now so that's just a cost of taking down the building. Now we're getting more into the details of needing to know what materials we might encounter in that demolition. And before we can give a full estimate of what the cost of taking down the building will be, we need to know what those materials we might encounter there will be.
Because you could save some materials possible.
Yeah, and I should clarify when I'm talking about materials, I'm speaking about hazardous materials that you brought up. We are definitely hoping to salvage any. We're looking at the siding and potentially the curved ceiling in particular to hopefully salvage. Maybe the curved bar could get repurposed somewhere. We're definitely looking at that in the next phase of rebuilding things and reusing materials where we can. But this is specifically just about safety in the building and any hazardous materials from the original construction.
Okay, that's all my questions for the present time.
Thank you. Commissioner Levy?
Sure, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to ask a question that probably doesn't have a definitive answer until we do the initial site assessment study. You mentioned a moment ago that hopefully some of the materials are suitable to be reused or preserved. Is there a realistic chance that the ultimate answer after that study is done is that nothing will be salvageable or reusable?
It's certainly possible. It's going to depend on the condition and the wear. And, you encounter wood that, depending on how much moisture the wood has absorbed over the years that the roof has been damaged, we just won't know until we basically take our tools and start poking around. My best guess is there's going to be a lot of the interior materials that can be saved, like the ceiling structure. The siding, anything that's been exposed to the southern, anything that's on the southern side and been exposed to a lot of sun in terms of siding without having any paint or stain on it, tends to sustain a lot of damage. So we're probably going to be looking at the sides of the building that don't have as much solar exposure to see which parts of those we can save.
So would it be correct to say that this study will help determine how feasible the jewel box even is in terms of, being a component of this project?
We're pretty confident that the jewel box, because it's fairly small in comparison to the rest of the building, there should be enough material to salvage from the rest of the building to make up for the parts of the jewel box that have deteriorated.
Thank you, that helps. And then my other question was for Kathy, in regards to the 150,000 that's short in phase one. It sounds like you're pretty confident that it's going to come in from other sources, but if it did need to come out of the Public Art and Beautification Fund, how much of an impact on that fund would that actually be?
That fund's really healthy also. So it's perfectly able to accomplish that.
Okay.
And wouldn't have any impact on our public art programs at this point in time.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. I saw Commissioner Coney, do you still have the question?
I do, actually.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. A few, and I'm going to play the I'm new card probably for the next 6 months, if that's okay for everybody. First question, Kathy, for you, specifically around, actually generally
around budget. I understand the concept of development fees, but I think the purpose of them is to apply them wherever there are impacts on community services, correct? So you collect developer fees based on the impact that it's having on the community, right? And those are applied to the services that we provide to the community. So my question is, so how is that decided and how is it allocated? So like parks is only one piece of the overall service we provide to the community.
Right. So the fees for park development, so they're like park development or park impact fees that are
Okay.
collected and for each project. And then those come to the Parks Commission via the CIP process. So the staff will prepare the list of all the projects that we're going to be using park development funds for. And they'll bring them to you to get your impact, your feedback, your thoughts, and then those fees move on. It's basically the CIP roadshow through the Finance Committee and City Council and everybody else who touches them till they eventually make it to the final City Council decision about whether or not they endorse your opinions in regards to how the park development funds would get used in that particular year. The CIP is just a one-year piece, although CIP projects can bridge many years. So that's how we can have money in a fund from a previous year while we're still working on a project. So every year, the CIP will come back to the Parks Commission. It's like clockwork. It's our regular operating procedure and the new list and the updated list. So conceivably, not that we may charge through each phase each year, but each year it'll come back up and you as a commission need to weigh and say, okay, well, you know what, this year we were on phase 4, but that's a lot of money. This year, it's 3 years from now, who knows what that's going to be.
Right.
We want to break this into 2. It's going to be easier to accomplish, or we want to delay a year because we need to build more pickleball courts, or we need a cricket pitch, or we need whatever other projects that are competing at that time. We don't know what all those might be when we get to those places. So that's why every year it will come back. And last year's CIP approved this first kind of beginning phase. It's going to be a little shy. So when you see this next CIP, depending on what happens tonight, you might see an additional allocation to try and get through phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I have a few other questions related to that, but I can take those offline just for my own edification. So I appreciate that. Actually, one other question. So when there is a planned development and there is a park that is actually constructed by the developer, how does that impact the fees if they're already providing a park space, for example?
That's a rather complicated question. So I'm going to simplify the answer because it depends on whether there's a development agreement or how that came in.
Got it.
But the best example is Bartlett Pear Park. So in that case, they are building the park and then the cost of the park is being deducted from the fees they owe us.
Okay.
So they are still paying fees because the combination of the cost of the land and the improvements is still less than the amount they would owe per the Quimby Act. So at the end of that park development, there'll be a true up phase, and then we'll make sure that we've collected all the rest of the fees that we should have collected.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, specifically, so Sarah, like you, I've been excited about this project for a long, long time. My wife and I used to walk to MUDS during happy hour, so it was just such a jewel in the community. It's nice to see that it's coming to fruition. How are we planning to deal with the creek erosion ultimately? Do we know how that's going to happen? Is it going to be retaining walls? How's that going to work?
It's been discussed and it's not on the action list right now to do anything other than fix the pipe. And I've done a lot of creek restoration work, bank stabilization, and if you were going to do it like Mother Nature would, it just wants to lean back at 2-to-1. So that means it'll lean back into your parking lot if that's what it ends up doing. And so when we looked at where the parking would be in this master plan phase, we worked with our engineer to come up with a hypothetical, it could go this far. It's going to shrink the parking lot, the existing front parking lot. Hardening a slope like that and getting into the creek is going to require regulatory permits, and it's very messy. So the decision was, let's keep an eye on it. And if it really needs to be dealt with quickly, then we'll shift priorities. But in the meantime, let's just fix the pipe and figure out what we can do. The regulatory agencies these days frown on throwing a bunch of riprap in a creek bank. And that's a really nice creek that you have too.
Right.
So we know bioengineering techniques and we know what they like, and we have people who can work with the agencies when it gets to that point. But that's a big project in and of itself. So
Yeah,
long
thank
answer.
you. Okay, no, thank you. Timing, so each phase, so once phase 1 and phase 2 is complete, will that be open and available to the public until the next phase is finished? So that phase or that aspect, that area will then be open to the public. And then phase 3, same thing, right? So I guess the community won't have access to phase 3 until it's complete.
So the parking lot, yeah. So the parking lot's not open because it's closed right now.
Right.
So until we complete that parking lot, it's going to remain closed.
Okay.
But once the building and the new shade area is created, then absolutely that would be open. I think the rest of the garden area is open and in use right now, and even there is access to the creek. It's just a steep hill.
Mhm.
So all of that would remain open, I think, until such time as we're actually going to renovate it in each phase. Then obviously we're going to close it off for the safety of the
Okay.
community, do the renovation in the phase, and then open it up.
Okay. And I just have one other question. So will we be collecting fees for any aspect of the property for community use?
We really don't have that kind of community use out there right now. You're talking like rental fees.
Correct.
And we don't at this point in time. I think once we get the picnic area set up, that would be a high potential. But I don't also think it will be that impactful in regards to how much fees we're going to collect. So it'll be an attribute, but in keeping with the original vision of that natural setting, I don't think it's going to be like, hey, we've got giant rentals out here.
Got
This will
it.
be more small family picnic kind
But
of
I
place.
assume that people will still need to reserve certain spots, right?
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
the outdoor pavilion and kitchen and things. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'm Vice Chair Breed.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I still love the design, by the way. Kathy, I know I sent you a note. I'm just trying to understand something really quick. Well, the only one question that I emailed that I'm still struggling with. So when a builder or a developer pays fees, they pay a set fee. So if all of a sudden inflation happens and they don't pull the permit for 5 years, if they paid $100, that fee stays at $100. It doesn't appreciate, right?
That's correct and that's kind of a planning question. So I even
Yeah.
double checked those answers to make sure I answered you correctly.
Right.
But that is correct. So
Wow.
if there's a
That's a good deal.
development agreement, it could
Yeah.
be different, but basically once that project is deemed complete and it's entitled by the planning commission, those are the fees are set for the time period that they set. So it's not forever. There's a time period that's set for each project, and then they can get it extended by staff, and then they'd have to go back to planning commission.
Gotcha, but the fees don't, I mean, because what kind of triggered it for me is I was reading the report and,
Mhm.
things go up and they just mentioned, with, kind of the changing environment that we're in, the fees could go up, but we're still stuck at whatever fees we're charging builders. Okay, so that, or developers. Okay, so that makes sense. I wanted to make sure I read that correctly, so thank you. Okay, I have a question regarding the PG&E box, right? So I don't know how much that costs to move. I was looking at it out there. So my question is, can we not have to pay to have that moved? Can we design around it? Is there a way to save money with not moving a box that's already there? So, because how much does it cost? Why are we moving it? There's a way we design to kind of save some cash for the city on that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can give you some more information about that. The PG&E box right now is
Flip back here.
kind of set to
Go to
there-
this.
Yeah,
Can
thanks for
grab
your help because I'm
a map.
not an architect. So I have no idea.
No,
So
that's
thanks.
totally fine. So and I don't have a laser pointer, that would be fun.
I know, it
Um,
makes it tougher. Sorry about that.
Yeah. If you find the note that says renovated building and pavilion next to the main building, and follow that leader line to where it intersects with a little parking lot, there's kind of a spur on the paving comes up to the back of the building there. So right where that spur is, or a T, maybe you would call that, is where that PG&E box is. So we're not gaining a ton of parking by adding that, but it is a bit of a necessary turnaround for a service vehicle bringing something to that side of the building. And so the PG&E box is about there and would likely need to get moved to make that access happen. Moving the box is somewhere around $250,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I saw that.
Not cheap.
Yep.
And if that number becomes a make or break piece of the design, we're very open to like working with ways of trying to get around that. It's definitely a big piece of the puzzle. And in a part of the park that might not need to get touched, or would love to not be able to. I think that's a really good observation and comment that we can take into future design.
And 250 is a large chunk, right? So if you're trying to move something, what's the benefit for the city of San Ramon and the citizens, right? So as we use a park, so that's just something that you heard me on it, so I appreciate it. And I'm
Yeah.
just questioning whether we need to do that, or is there another design that might be cheaper, or we're not dropping 250, you know?
Mhm.
So, okay, cool.
Can I just ask,
What's that?
can I just ask related to question to that?
It costs you $10. Of course you can.
I'll pay you.
Of
after.
course you can.
About this box, so what you are saying is not necessary to move it. We are just moving it because we thought better to move it, but it is not necessary to move it. Is that what I'm hearing?
We think that, the current design calls for moving it based on being able to access the back of the building with that, that paving, and creating the ability for a car to get in and out of there. But if the desire of the city is to find a way to not have to spend that money, we can look at the exact location of it and see if there are ways around not having to move it.
I might just add into, if I recall correctly, I think we put one ADA parking space on that backside as well. And
That's right.
so I don't know if that's involved in this, but I know there's some of that back there that are adjacent right to the building.
Yeah, I mean, this rendering is now layered so thickly on top of the aerial that I can't pinpoint exactly where it is to tell you what's drawn on top of it, but it's just back behind the building there, and we'll have to look at how we could rearrange the access there. And we can make that a point of the next time we revisit the design.
Yeah, I appreciate, it's just curious, right? I'm just asking questions. So
Yeah,
on it,
no.
and as we figure out how do we best utilize it. And my next question.
Yeah.
So my wife's an interior designer, right? So, and when she does like projects, they have like change fees. Like all of a sudden if Terry and I are buying a house, we're like, oh my God, we want to change that wall. We don't like it. Do we have change fees built into like this 650? And, you know, so if all of a sudden, because I saw prices up, so if we look at each phase,
Mhm.
have you already, whoever did the budget, did they plan in change fees or fees that would happen if all of a sudden, oh my God, this is, and I know it's hard to predict. but
Yeah.
do we have some fluff in there to cover that stuff?
I think we call those contingencies
Yeah.
in our in landscape architecture, and yes, there is a 25% contingency built into
Each one of the phases.
just initially into the phase. into the first phase. So we took our cost estimate that we used for the master plan, added a 25% contingency fee to that, and then escalated those costs based on a 5% yearly escalation.
Yeah.
And so we weren't compounding or double dipping on that contingency, but there is a fluff fund or a buffer in there for unforeseen costs.
So if I look at the 664, you're saying, hey, we built in a 25% contingent fee on that one. So as Kathy just walked us through the data, we're
Yeah,
feeling pretty confident we're not going to come back to the city and say, hey, guess what? We need more money on that, right? And I know you can't predict the future and some unexpected, but
Yeah.
as much as you know,
that's
right,
correct.
you've already built in contingency.
Got it in the table. Yes, there's a 25%.
Yeah, I don't have that. Okay, that's super helpful.
Uh-huh.
And then let me ask you another question. You know, as I'm sitting there thinking about how funding comes in, we have this estimated fee, and I was looking at the first one, and I'm not a big fan of not having data. So this one says for 414 for phase one. So it sounds like I sent Kathy a note on it, says abatement and other services we need to do for making sure that building's safe or ecological stuff. So my question is, let's just say we do some of that stuff and all of a sudden we wait to build as a city. Will
Mhm.
that information we obtain be valuable maybe 2 or 3 years ago, or are we gonna have to go back and visit? So what I'm trying to think is, as we make an investment into these fees from contractors coming to do some abatement or whatever they're
Right.
doing, and we have to wait because we're not getting the money coming in,
Uh-huh.
will that information be really valuable? We'll have to repay to go redo it.
Be lost. So with a hazmat assessment that the knowledge of whatever materials are in the building, that's that knowledge will stay indefinitely. Any cost estimate numbers that we received on cleanup could probably be estimated and then escalated based on time that passes between when we get that estimate and when the work is done. We certainly recognize that challenge of getting numbers and time passing and prices changing. We can we definitely recommend that phases 1 and 2 be done either at the same time or as close to each other as they can, so that we can do the demo and move straight into finishing the building, so that we don't have to spend extra money on mothballing in the middle of that process. And I do want to ask Greg if I'm
Before you ask him the
explaining.
question, you brought up
Oh.
a really good point. How long can we wait till we start phase 2 until we have to mothball? So how much time do we have in between phase 1 to phase 2 where we wait too long, it's gonna cost us more money?
I would say a wet season would
Wet
be,
season?
but
Oh, like rainy season?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, do we have those anymore? It's
That's a shame.
it's once the building is demoed, I mean, there are tarps protecting that building from rain right now, so it's not in pristine condition. But once we demo and clean out material that we don't want to keep anymore, we don't want that to get wet and start the decay or mold process all over again. So phase 1 includes mothballing to do demo and protect that work. Phase 2 picks up from there and finishes the construction to have a new building that people can come and visit. If we're able to secure funds to go straight on through from 1 into 2, then you don't necessarily have to go into the work and spend the funds to mothball.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying, and I just want to repeat your answer as I make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is, hey, we probably have about 6 to 8 months or a year if you all of a sudden you wait from phase one to phase two? Because that's important as we get our CIP process, right?
Yeah.
As we make decision that it may cost us more money, right? So I understand you correctly on that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, so I could
Perfect.
imagine you
Got it.
start your demo after, maybe March when the wet season is done. And then hopefully you can move through that. Well, it depends on the funds, if you could get into
No,
phase two.
you
though.
helped. I mean, super helpful. I know it's a tough question, but if you're thinking about budgeting, right, and we got to go in March, we can't, it shows you how long we can wait. So, yeah.
Just to kind of reinforce and explain a little bit more, once we do the demolition, the building envelope opens up. And once you get moisture and things getting into the building, any of the assessment that we do now during the phase one to see what the condition of the materials are, it will change if we wait too long. So then we have to come back and do the conditions assessment again, a second time, if the building waits too long before we move into phase two.
So do we have that data on how long we can wait in between each phase?
Well, I think it comes down to when we get started and what's in the phase. So, so ideally, and that's why in your staff report, you see, I gave you the cost of phase one and
Yeah.
phase two together, because that's our perfect world. And that's the money that would help us really make this project happen. Then you could wait, you could wait longer for phase 3, 4, 5.
So one and two are closely connected.
They
Okay,
are
now
closely
this-
connected.
and
It's not
because- yeah.
impossible to do only phase one. It can be done, but it's not ideal.
But if we don't, it costs us a lot more. It could cost us more money. That's super helpful, right?
Would cost, I mean, if we could do to be frank, because we phased it over like 6 years, if we did the whole project now, I think when I did the math, we saved like 1.3 million
Mhm.
if we
Yeah.
did it all at once. But that may be not feasible because the fees aren't coming in. So, phase one and phase two, I think, are feasible, just depending on the fund.
Within a year,
Within a year.
within a year. Because once again,
Mhm.
if we approve and with timeline, sorry, Terry and I think are on the same timeline. We just got to save the city. I know you're like, no dust, Steve. But we're trying to save the city money. So we got to make the right decision to say, here's when the revenue's coming in, here's phase one, here's phase two, right?
So I think I understand what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
So we are waiting for the development fees, because the park development fees are the easiest access. They're already allocated. Most of it's approved in the CIP. So we're maybe $1 million shy. But it's not the only source of funding for a park. So the city council could decide that they want to pull it from the general fund. They could decide that we're going to borrow from our beautification fund. They could make several other decisions on how to access the dollars to get the project done. It's not as clean and tidy as the park development fund, but it can be done. So if you're asking me, are there funds available? There could be, depending on the will of the city council.
Yeah, I just think that it would be helpful to know if we waited going forward with that, how much it would cost. So if all of a sudden we make a recommendation and the city council wants to know kind of what's the cost, and we say, hey, if we wait, it may cost us another $200,000 or $300,000 between phase one, phase two. They're interconnected, if that's the right word to use, that we need to fund them together. If not, it's going to cost us $250,000. That's probably a better way. I made that number up. It's a better way to think about it, right?
Yeah, well,
Okay, got it.
certainly, and that would be part of the CIP discussion that'll be coming your way in March.
Yeah, I was just trying to think it through,
Mhm.
and this is good data to have. I'm sorry, I'm kind of caught on that, but it's helpful.
And I can offer one other piece of the puzzle. If, depending on how this is bid and awarded,
Yeah,
and the GC that ultimately signs on for this, that GC may look at a pause and determine that there's a remobilization fee required if the pause is too long. Say that bidder bids for both phase one and phase two, but then phase two gets delayed. All the contractors and equipment goes away for a year. He or she has to then bring it all back, restaff and whatnot. So if you can have a continuous phase one and phase two, you don't have that remobilization effort on the contractor's part.
no, I get that. That's
Mhm.
super helpful. It's just education, and I
Sure.
really appreciate you educating some salesmen, so I appreciate that. So, the other question I have is, so when and it kind of ties to what Terry said, when we use a park, as a city, we just started doing classes and stuff. Is that all in phase two? When we start doing that, would that be all phase two related as we do gardening classes and? So
We
if we look
actually-
at each phase, which phase would we use as a city to do classes? And
We
such?
actually do some classes and programming out there right now.
Okay,
So, the wassail event, apple tasting, different things. So nature classes, nature camp. So we are doing those programs out there. Will they be enhanced greatly by an improved space? Yes.
so like a phase two would get more use for more citizens, probably is a better way of saying it, versus phase, because I kind of like the trail, but that would probably get no uses. That's more of a Steve thing. I got you. Okay, that's it really helps make the decision. Okay, and then sorry, you guys, this is kind of cool. Just trying to
No,
clarify.
please,
Yeah,
it's-
go.
I think it's
Yeah,
actually
please.
kind of helpful to add, Steve, that in talking about phasing and when are you going to get to start using these pieces of the park, that phases 1 and 2 are really just building the pavilion and the jewel box and not doing a whole lot of site work connecting it to the rest of the park. I think it could be open and might be able to bring people through to the building, but it won't be until through the end of phase 3 when the 2 parking lots would be renovated and connected, and those pathways reattaching to the building, that then it would be a really open and fully functioning part of the park again.
Yeah.
And a
Not to another
restroom.
question. Hey, Terry asked about the parking lot. Are we concerned about one of the parking lots having too much deterioration that we may not be able to use it? I got lost in that answer. So,
The parking lot off the to the right-hand side of the plan from Muds, that's currently falling into the creek. And what we've drawn here is already set back 25 feet from the creek flow line. So we've talked in the past in the master plan phase about using K-rail or some kind of barrier to just keep people from parking and using the deteriorating creek edge
yeah.
there. But yeah, that parking lot is actively sloughing
Falling,
into
yeah,
the
okay,
creek.
that's helpful. I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Okay, last question. How's our public service department? I mean, we have really cool, great, amazing public service people. That do amazing. Do they get involved in this at all? And what's their role?
We've got John, the division manager right back there. So you could just wave.
Am I allowed to ask him a question?
Yeah.
John, sorry about that. You look great, by the way. So,
Feel good.
Joe, my question is, what role does our what role do you guys play in the Crow Canyon development from once we started? Are we hands off and the contractor does it, or do you
The-
play a role to help out and help us save costs? What role does that department play?
We've
What we do
discussed
for it.
some options that public service could play a role to save some money throughout the process, whether it's demolition. Right now, we're just doing general maintenance to try to keep upkeep and keep everything fenced off, safe, kind of not an eyesore as people drive by until construction begins. We won't have a major role in the construction. It'll be a general contractor.
Got it. But if there's something we have an area of expertise in, they're looking for, we can say, hey, we can do that.
Yes,
Okay.
we've definitely talked to Kathy about some options on specifically like a demolition or cleanup that we can go in there and help out.
Yeah, I mean, I have really high admiration for the work you all do for our city, and I think our skill set from what we read in the report is phenomenal. So I just hope that we leverage your skill set as we go through. So,
I think we have staff that would be super excited to be a part of it too. So
and we would say, hey, we've skill set, we can tell the contractor. and
we have some
that's
talented
different.
people
Okay,
for sure.
Cool.
Mhm.
All right, thank you so much for
No
answering the
problem.
question. I'm done. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Mr. Chair, I have just one quick follow-up and I apologize.
10
Just,
bucks, right?
yeah, I'll go 20 on this one.
Same.
And I may have missed it, but like when, like in an ideal world to actually put shovel into the ground, when could that happen for phase 1?
Phase 1 could start almost immediately because we have the 517,000 already allocated and we have that money collected. So some of the beginning work, but as PlaceWorks said, there's a lot of work that has to get done before we can like start knocking the building completely down, because they need to do some of the analysis of the hazardous materials. And when they say that, I know we don't necessarily speak in those terms, but that's like asbestos and those kinds of things. We have to know what's there so that we can safely remediate it and make sure that everything that gets removed from that building correctly.
Got it.
So there's a piece of that work. So yes, I mean, that part of the project can start now, but it's very helpful for us to have the commission's phasing and viewpoint so that we are taking off on a phased approach that makes sense to all of you.
So this body would need to approve the plan for phasing in order for that to happen, right?
That,
So
yeah, that is
and
really.
if we don't do it tonight, then,
Some of it has already been approved by you
Okay.
via the CIP. So technically, you've approved these projects moving forward and it's approved by the city council. That's how we have the allocated funds. So we have an approved, okay to go forward, but this is a complicated project. It's a long-term project. The commission's been very involved in it. So rather than charging off in a direction and then coming back around at the CIP point and saying, hey, this is the phasing, we're seeking your input and your feedback to get the phasing, make sure we've got those dollars right. So for example, if you said, gosh, we think the parking lot is more important than something else, we'd like to move that forward, or the children's playground or the trail, per your comment, Commissioner Breed, this would be the time to do that so that we can get the phasing correct, we can get the dollars correct, and then we can land them into the CIP. You'll see it in March as what's approved or what you're recommending for this year, and the city council will move forward to approve. And then it will also show in the 5-year CIP. So then as you're looking out into the future, you can see all the projects then lined up that we think are coming in those future years and start to get a sense of where your priorities lie.
Cause the only
No, go ahead, please.
the only confusion I have kind of leaving this conversation is parking lot. Like, as a parking lot, I'm really unclear still, should the parking lot be a higher priority because of deterioration or not? I'm super confused, to be really frank with you on it.
Okay, so let me see if I can draw a little light on it.
Yeah.
So the parking lot, and when you walked out there, you probably remember it. The way that it looks now is bigger. We can't sustain a parking lot of that size in that location because of the creek, period. So it doesn't matter what you do, that part of that edge is sloughed off too far and we can't sustain it. So the master plan we've approved moved that first whole row of parking will no longer be parking. It moved it way over. So it is my understanding that even if we do nothing with the creek bank, it will take many, many, many years before we have a problem with where we've repositioned that parking.
Okay.
It's one of these lovely people who is an
No,
engineer.
you
who
answered the question.
dives
Mark,
into
so that's
it
helpful.
more.
Yeah.
In- Just to kind of put the last little piece on this, the parking's important, but right now the park is utilized and we have good numbers of people that are out there pretty regularly enjoying nature, and that parking lot's closed. So they park on the street, they park on the front. We have lots of people walking from the surrounding neighborhoods. So although I think the parking is very important ultimately, because I think once we fix this pavilion, people will want to be there. I think the park is still usable until we can get to the phase with the parking.
And we haven't had any complaints from anybody around parking with Crow Canyon around that area.
Not a ton, no.
Okay.
We've had a few issues, but not a ton.
Nothing. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great presentation. I have few questions. First one, couple of for you, Kathy, is just in your first slides, you had, and this is a hypothetical question, is that I know it's not going to be there. You said if the 150K, we may not be able to find it, then you said the scope of the first phase could be reduced. Do we have a plan? Like, what are we going to give away? I know it's a hypothetical, probably not going to have it. We will find that 150K, but just wondering.
Yeah, I don't know that I could answer with a very specific item because we know that over time, we're going to move across those funds. And we do know that we could borrow them from the beautification fund, and we already have them allocated in the CIP. So no, I don't have a specific of what we wouldn't do, but that is an option when we get to that point. If we don't want to borrow the money from the beautification fund and the funds haven't come in, then we could look at the project at that point and go, okay, well, where are we at? And what could be trimmed off.
Right.
So when you look at that first building phase, there's an outdoor kitchen area.
Mhm.
You know, so in theory, maybe you do the building and you do the shade structure, but then you just don't put the kitchen in until later.
Second question about the development money that we are expected to come in, right? And I think it is related to around 5,000 units that we are building over several years, right? And then we are, there is a, if I understand correctly, there will be some, the builders need to pay per unit basis, right? For over the phase of those, all those 5,000. units.
For the housing
For
development.
the housing
Yes.
development fund on that one. And this is a span of like 20 years, 30 years?
There's quite a bit of development that's being forecasted in the next even 5 to 10 years. You know, it's, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's in the millions of dollars. So, you know, we're talking about $10 million or so that we'll see coming into the park development over the next 5 to 10 years. So we can get nailed down a little closer each year. The planning, community development does a presentation of all the projects they have coming, and you know, they nail down a little further and a little further, and every year it's a little bit of a moving target, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
I mean, the reason is that we are looking at 8 million total as of right now, most likely go up because 3 phases are estimated, right?
Mhm.
We don't even know whether that will be the cost. Anywhere close to that will be more than that. So just wanted to know, we, at this point today, do we know even if we want to finish it, this whole project in next 6 years, are we confident enough that we will be getting that much money from here, from this product development fund?
Yeah, I'm confident that we have enough money, but the question are the competing priorities.
Right, of course.
And
of course.
so, yeah, do we have enough? Would we be able to do it? Yes. If that's the will and the choice of the commission and then ultimately the city council, absolutely, we
Right.
could do it all.
Right.
Is there a likelihood that we might get through phase 4 and then get stuck on that creek trail? Possibly. That is probably the component that is the most grant fundable of the whole project, because it does deal with waterways and access to waterways, which there are a lot of grants out there in the state to give people access. We, as you know, are a very affluent community, so we are not the first choice for grants for just regular park development. We also are in possession of, what is it, 64 parks? So, you know, these other cities that have 3 are always looked at to give those monies away. But that trail down to the water is unique.
Mhm.
So we do have the money, could be used. That last phase, I think, is very grant fundable. And there may be some other funding mechanisms we could look at for other parts too.
So, yeah, so just wanted to know that as of we are projecting for the next 6 years, we see there is a high probability that much or more money coming in, whether are we going to be using the whole money for this or other competing, that is definitely we'll discuss not only here in the city council as well, but at least we see this much money coming in the next 6 years.
Correct.
Okay, I think we answered that question about, I had a question about if we just go ahead to open it for public, we can, I think the answer was phase 3 where we can open the park for the public. Okay, all right. One second, I see the phase 3 optional. What is that? Next to the phase 3.
Kathy, can I just clarify something? Because it's come up a couple times that I want to, and we've kind of reiterated it. The park will always be open to the general public.
Okay.
The only thing that will not be open to the general public during construction is the area that's being constructed.
Right.
So when we do phase 1 and 2, the whole rest of the park is still going to be available to the public. We'll still be doing demonstration gardens. We'll still have the community allotments. We'll still be operating programs, camps, all of that kind of stuff out there. It will just be the areas that will be
Got it.
under construction that will be closed. And then when they're done, they'll be open up. Yes, there probably will be some walkways that will not be as attractive as other walkways after we finish 1 and 2, but people will still be able to get to those spaces. And then when we do construction on phase 3 or phase 4, that's when those areas will go offline, but the rest of the park will still be usable. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Coming back to the phase 3 optional. Do we know what is that? Can we just put that?
We're taking turns here. The phase 3 optional, that is the repair of the creek bank. And we don't have a number for that. At this point, the decision was, let's focus on the park, let's monitor the creek. So we just said phase 3 optional, and we've looked at what that might cost, but we haven't brought anything forward to you to say this is what it's going to cost to even assess it, let alone stabilize the creek bank. If that is something that the commission would like us to add into and include, if that becomes a priority above and beyond the old MUD's building structure, redesign of that, then we could go ahead and look at that. But it seemed like that was on the back burner for now until it became urgent.
Okay. No, I was just wondering what is optional.
Oh,
But because
so-
I haven't seen anywhere the mention of optional.
Right,
Other
right.
than this map, so.
In other words, we didn't give you any money it didn't give you an estimate to do that.
Right.
So we made it optional
Okay,
for
all right.
ourselves.
Sure, thank you. Coming back to, so phase 4, anyway, we know that phase 3, 4, and 5 are estimated as of right now. Phase 4 is the biggest one, right? 3.4 billion. And it's I'm looking at the map, and that's a lot of work, pathways, lot of things on that. Is there any way, if needed be, to break it down?
Brad mentioned, the park. Yes, if you get to the point that you're ready to move forward with phase 4, and then each of these will have to be updated as time goes on to say, well, it's going to be this now. If you have priorities that you'd like to see within what we described as phase 4, we could have phase 4A, phase 4B, but we would want direction, as Kathy had said, from you. But that part of the park will still be, as Brad had mentioned, open to the public and accessible. So, but let us know if you'd like to
No,
break it down.
Again, I'm just thinking of a hypothetical situation that
Sure.
we may not have the whole amount of money, but we have some, and
Yeah.
said, hey, can we get a part of it?
Right.
Prioritize A, B, C, prioritize and get part of it done rather than wait until we have the whole lot of money to get this whole.
Yeah,
phase done.
and to see when the money comes in, how it's coming in. If you get a sense that this is dragging on, it's not going to happen. What would help us, and Kathy too, would be to get from you as the commission an idea of what your general priorities are, your playground versus the walking path versus whatever, and then say, what can we get? These are our priorities, and this is how much money we think we're going to have. And then that would give us an idea of how to break it down for you.
Right, at that point, we can say playground is the priority one. So there you go, we do that. Or somebody might say, no, pathway, I want to ADA or pathway or something like that. So that at that point, if we reach to that point, we can decide on that. But it'll be, I mean, I'm just wondering to have that break it down, A, B, C on that. If we reach to that point, if we have a situation like that, then it'll be easier decision to pick one of those and go ahead with that.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay. Last question is about this estimations. You said phase 3, 4, 5 has a 5% annual escalation over next 6 year span. The subtotal, are they inclusive? Are they included that 5% escalation for 6 years?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead and stand up. You're going to answer.
The answer is yes, but, and I just, was wondering if you could restate the question.
So what I was saying that is that I'm looking at the notes below. I said as a percent multiplier for fees and assuming a 5% annual escalation over a 6 year span.
Yeah,
And if I'm looking at 3, 4 phase, I'm just wondering this 1.8, 3.4, and 975, that 5% is included.
That's correct. Yes, it's
not
included there.
Okay, it's included for 6 years but beyond that is not. That's what I'm.
That's correct. Yeah, we went out to 2025, I believe, in our escalation.
Okay. Good. All right. And any,
I had
you have a question, right? Yeah,
another
go ahead.
question when we were talking about when we're doing all of these things and questions. What would be the first actual month of 2025 that this could start?
I mean, conceivably, it can start now. You know, again, there's money allocated and there are funds available. There's a good amount of work that PlaceWorks needs to do to start moving everything forward and then move into demolition.
So you're saying maybe June, something, April,
No, now, I mean, February.
February?
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna see somebody out there with a sledgehammer in February because there's work that has to happen in front of that, but it would work into the summertime.
Well, that's my question, because I mean, this has been going on for years, and so the people, our community is getting really uptight that nothing's being done. And so I think the sooner that we start something, the better off we're going to be, because we also just ask our citizens for a 1% tax increase. And so you're going to get some feedback if we don't start something soon, because this has been around for years. And as my husband said, maybe we won't even be around to see this finished.
I'm in complete agreement with you.
And would we do a groundbreaking for that at some point? Not that it's matters, but just
That, you
wondering.
know what? That's a whole new idea. I don't know. So I'll have to get
Sorry, I
back
didn't
to
give you
on
one
that.
more thing to do.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I do know for sure, as we probably complete phases on this project, we're probably going to celebrate every single one
Yeah.
because I think it's exciting.
For sure.
And I think people will be thrilled when they get to see the vision of the shade pavilion and the jewel box. So absolutely, we'll be celebrating that as if it was a park opening 5 times.
Right.
Cool. All right. All right. Any other question from the commission? No. All right. We're going to public comment. First one is Max Zhang.
Hello, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commission, and staff. My name is Max Zhang. I live in Windermere Ranch. Sadly, I actually want to speak against approving this project tonight, and not because I'm opposed to the renovation. I think it's a beautiful renovation of Crow Canyon Gardens, and not because I want to discredit the excellent work of staff or of PlaceWorks. You know, that binder really speaks for itself. I just feel like as a citizen, there isn't enough transparency on the cost of the project for the commission to really make an informed decision about approving it. And as a citizen myself, I just don't necessarily feel comfortable with not knowing exactly how our taxpayer dollars are being spent here. And I really wouldn't be making this comment if San Ramon wasn't facing budgetary issues. You know, if we were flush with cash, I'd say by all means, let's get this project done. But, you know, the project will cost $8.8 million overall, and construction costs could increase under the new administration, as PlaceWorks mentioned. And, you know, for comparison, for fiscal year 24-25, the city made budget cuts to departments of $8.1 million. So the cost of this project is not insignificant. Of course, recently, we just passed Measure N to increase our sales tax by 1% to raise, $15 million annually for the next decade. And I think it sort of speaks to some concerns, some more long-term concerns of our city to be able to fund things. And so once again, I don't oppose the renovation by any means. I just feel that we might not be in the right position to emphasize getting things like parks built, given that we have to make difficult decisions about what kind of funding to departments we need to cut. And I don't want us to sacrifice our necessary services like police, like firefighting, especially given what we've seen in Los Angeles, like transportation and our road infrastructure. And we have 64 parks, as you mentioned. So it's not the end of the world for us if we cannot get necessarily one more park renovated, but it would be a big deal if we have to make serious cuts to our other services, or if we have to find other ways to increase revenue through sales taxes or other revenue generating measures. So So those are the concerns that I'm worried about. Like, are we balancing this park and this renovation against our other priorities? And as you, the commission, and as an average citizen, do we have enough information to make sure we know exactly what we're getting out of this renovation? Are we getting a good deal for our money? Are similar renovations in other cities, how do those compare in terms of cost? Or renovations that we've done in the past for San Ramon, how do those compare in cost? I just want to make sure that we're making an informed decision here. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Any other public comment? Thank you. Okay, let's move on to commission comments. Do we go through from the right? Sure. Go ahead.
Start with the student commissioner.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, overall, I think it's like a very interesting plan. I know there's probably a lot to be done with the Crow Canyon Garden, so I really appreciate the whole thought out plan. I really enjoyed really looking at each aspect of the plan and seeing which part you would like to implement and which parts and when. So I think it was a really interesting plan to look at. But again, I do think obviously it's a lot of money, but I do see the impacts of it and how we do want to put it towards this park that is obviously being such a big part of our citizens' lives. But I do also agree that it is a big part of our budget. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed looking at this plan, seeing what really needs to be improved within the park and seeing how we are planning on tackling that in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Levy?
Sure. No, I think we're all in agreement from the discussion we've had tonight and then the other meetings leading up to this. This is a complicated project that it's gone on a very long time. And I think there are a fair amount of uncertainties which make it difficult to estimate the final cost or the final scope. So I think the phased approach, given the fiscal realities we have, was the best solution that we could come up with. And I think ultimately the breakdown of the phasing is probably right. Phase one, with the assessments and the studies that would be conducted as part of that, would help eliminate some of the uncertainties or the unknowns and help really inform the rest of the project going forward. So I do think it's a necessary step, and I do like that it's closely tied to the second phase. I think those two together could help build a real sense of momentum to finally get this thing over the finish line. So yeah, I don't really have any proposed adjustments to the phasing plan as presented. I think under the circumstances, this is probably the most responsible approach that we can approve at this point. So that's my comment.
All right. Commissioner Lopez Lucy?
Well, I do have concerns for so much money and that, we've cut budgets and everything. And I'm just, the part that we don't have the money, it really bothers me that we have such excessive. I think 1 and 2 have to get started because this has been going on. We have to show faith that we have started it, but I don't know if there's anything that you can cut out of here in phase 1 or phase 2. But if there is, that's what I would be for, because I would be interested in having to move that PG&E, which would cut out $250,000, which would it's $250,000. It's not too much, but still in the overall picture, it's still a lot of money. So the other question I would have is, we have 2 other parks that have sat vacant for years, the Woodlot and the one up on the hill, Henry Ranch. Will those interfere? Because nothing's being done on them because they're vacant. And so it's not like it's in use or anything like that. But would that ever come into play cut into this project? Or we're okay because we've already approved this project?
Both those parks are funded through the development agreement with the City Walk or Bishop Ranch. So they are required at a certain number of building permits pulled to build turnkey parks for us. The only way that would have an impact is if the commission and city council wanted more attributes in those parks than the approved funding that they've got put into that agreement costs. So again, it would be that discussion, but the vast amount of the development of both those parks is already funded. And if we want them to be just within that fund, they can be. So that's the good news.
That's good. Okay. Well, because I do have questions on it, whether that I vote no on, but I want to proceed with it, but I still am really concerned that it's so much money. And how many years will this take to complete?
Well, it can take as many as we want it to take. I
Yes,
mean,
but I
you
mean,
know,
feasibly, if it would go one,
if
two,
we, if we
three.
just kept moving, it would probably take us 5 or 6 years if you just kind of kept going phase by phase each year. And again, some of them might take a little longer than a year and some, you know,
Shorter.
just depends.
But it still gives an estimate as what
Yeah.
we're looking at, because you can tell people, look, because that's the one question I'm gonna get is, you know, how long is this gonna take with
Mhm.
this much money?
Yeah.
So I do have concerns about voting for this,
For the phasing.
for the phasing.
All right. Vice Chair Reed?
Hey, can I ask one more question before I make my comment?
Of course.
I just want to be really understand. So will we have the money for 1 and 2 within a year? I know it depends on what we approve with CIP, but for the park fees coming in,
I can't, I don't have a crystal ball, so I wish that I did, and I could say
heard you did, damn it.
absolutely. I believe that we will be able to get the phase 1 funding. I think that's gonna come in. I don't think
Yeah, I
that's
agree
gonna
with you.
be a problem. That next little chunk, I am optimistic that it will come in, but I will have a much better sense when we spend more time with our community development people and we bring it in the CIP. So I would anticipate being able to answer that question more fully at the point that we're actually asking you about the money.
because they're just married to me. So, okay. Hey, so first of all, thanks for your time and I appreciate everyone coming in tonight. As we think about Crow Canyon Gardens, one, it's a really cool park, right? It creates a really unique point of differentiation for the city that I don't think we even have anywhere. And I get really excited when I go there because of the gardens and it's about really taking care of the environment. It's a great place to educate our citizens about this wonderful city we live in. And if you think about, we step back, and we look at the MUDS building and there's been a lot of passion about it. One, right now, we need to do something because it's a public safety hazard, right? I mean, if we step back and say, hey, we don't do anything, it's still a public safety hazard. We've had people sleeping around the park and, which is fine, but it's still a risk to the city. So we need to solve that building right away. Because one, it's a safety issue, and more importantly, it's in part of our plan. So I think that's really important. The other part is, we need, as I was trying to knock on the door, is how do we continue to be cost conscious, right? I would push really hard on the PG&E box, right? I mean, do we have to really move it? Do we not move it? We save $250,000. I mean, we do it. Can we leverage our public service? I'm over the moon with our public service department. Maybe I just think they do such an amazing job, but how do we leverage their expertise as we go along this? We're already paying the cost, but as we're a little more cost effective because the fund's already allocated to the parks, right? So my point being is how do we be smart in that? And then also if we use all these consultant fees, which how do we make sure when we look at the consultant fees that we're getting data that we can use year over year, right? As we take a look at that, we're being really smart on as we bid and what's the data we're getting and what we have to go back 5 years. So I would really encourage us to be smart as we go along that process. So we get the data the way to go repay for it as just in case we do have to mothball it. If something doesn't happen from my friend's crystal ball at the end of the table, right? So, and then the last couple things I'd say is, I feel better about the parking lot thing, so it makes me feel a little bit better as we look priorities. So, you know, my point as I go forward is I'm in favor of putting phase 1 and 2 together. And the reason I'm continuing to put 1 and 2 together, I mean, I like the phase approach, but we really need to think as a commission, as we approve, if they're linked and if they're trying to save costs, how do we make sure from a CIP standpoint, we're really smart, because if we make that decision, then there's other things that's not going to happen, but we're trying to, you know, get this done and provide a really unique place for our city. And that's why I go back to what I said originally is, you know, one, it's a safety issue. Two, we're trying to create a really unique, I know it's so interesting. People say, what's great about San Ramon? One thing people love about this is our parks. And I know we have 64 parks, but each serve a really different, unique place. Crow Canyon serves such a really unique point. It's sort of like Forest Home Farms to me. You go there and you know that's very different, and you're going to go to Crow Canyon, and it's going to, I think there's so much we can do from educating our students in schools. So I get super excited about this, which, because I'm a baseball guy, can you imagine that? But anyway, so I'm super excited about the whole thing. So I just encourage us to, as we approve this, we need to think about, they're married together. We need to think about driving cost out of this because we're park funds and be smart about it. And the other part is that in the future, I'd like to see kind of the stuff broke down on fees wise, by the way, but it just keep them together, right? So you got me, and then leverage, unreinforced, leverage our public service department because they're super smart and have a lot of expertise. So, okay, that's where I'm at it. So thank you so much I can't, once again, really solid work. Thank you guys so much for your time, and thanks for everyone sitting through. And we're hearing the cost, but we have fees allocated for parks. So, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Commissioner Coney?
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want, first of all, thanks for indulging me. This is my first crack at this. I think my colleagues have all seen this project for quite a while and have seen that binder grow and grow, I'm sure. So for me, I'm seeing it for the first time, and it's pretty thick. So it was my first opportunity to kind of dig in. So I'm excited for that reason as well. But I also like the phased approach. I particularly like the fact that we're starting with the building, mainly because the building has been closed for so long, and people associate that property with that building in so many ways, right? It's the MUD's property. I mean, we've grown accustomed to kind of seeing that sort of fenced off, and you drive by and you think, what are we doing with that space? What's happening? So to see we're gonna start to see that start to evolve is super exciting for me. So I'm really glad that is part of the phase 1 and 2. Brad, thank you for clarifying that the rest of the property is going to continue to be open for the community. So there's not going to be any issues or challenges there. So I'm glad that that's happening too. I was with Steve. My only concern, I think, had to do with the parking lot, but Kathy, you helped to clarify that, once that does encroach on that space, it's going to be a long, long time. So we'll deal with it when it comes. I think it's just time for us to move forward on this project. And I think just to address our speaker's question, thank you for it. Appreciate it. These are all restricted funds, right? So this is not money that's coming from the general fund. These are all restricted funds that have to be used for purposes like this. So I think for me is helpful as well, understanding that the city is in kind of some financial challenges. So I'm just happy to see that the money is being put to use in this way, that we're phasing it so that we can see kind of the incremental aspects of this project come to life. And yeah, I'm in favor.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming today and for your time and all the effort. It's been a long time coming. Since I joined the commission, I've been hearing it, and you can see the binder has been going very long way. Not only that, there are a lot of people who are really extremely asking for it, to do something about it. And it is a safety issue there. When I moved to San Ramon from the day one, I see that place cordoned off, and I've never been there. So it's good to know that people used to go there and have salad, which is a unique kind of salad so that's a good thing. So if we can bring back some of that definitely I would like that. Now, having said that, we hear that over and over again, the cost factor is in the today's time, not only we are saying it's a high cost, what we hear from you, it can go up pretty soon, pretty quick. And so that's one of the big concern on that. And thank you for your comment on that as well, concerns. And we have the same concern as well. But at the same time, this is a long pending things. There is a big community demand that something to do with that. It's not only unsafe, it is an eyesore, and it has been being discussed over and over again for a long, long time. A lot of people have spent a lot of time, energy on this to think about it. I like the phased approach. Of course, it is needed because this is a big, huge project. It's good to know that we have a plan for funding this, although it is future tense. We will, but at least to know that there is some plan for that. So thank you for coming up with that. For me, I think I am a little hesitant to go ahead with phase 3, 4, 5, just because the uncertainty right now. because we do not know. We are just throwing a number here, what I feel, tell me if I'm wrong, just by the square footage, if I read it correctly, right? That's what we are doing that. Is it going to be anywhere close to that? I don't know. I'm on that. So if what we are going, and one of the phase is a huge number, 3.4 million or 4 point something million, right? So that's where I hesitate to on that. I know we're just approving the phases, but what is the implications of that when you reach to the point? Will that be, oh, okay, it was already approved because the phase was approved on that? I don't know. I mean, that's what I.
It would come to you in the CIP. So yes, staff will go, okay, well, the next phase is phase 4. Let's say we're to that year. And we might look at it and go, okay, well, we don't have enough money. We can't figure out how to make this work. So then staff's probably going to come forward and say, well, we think that we can't do phase 4 this year because we don't have the funds for it, or we think we could split it this way, and we might come back ahead of the CIP again to say, okay, let's dig in a little bit more to phase 4 because we need to think harder about it. Maybe we don't need the second shade structure. Maybe we don't need the whatever that piece is. So yeah, the beginning phases, those are hard numbers. They worked hard to get those narrowed down because those were the phase 1 and phase 2 are kind of the more essential pieces we need to get to. But as you go into 3, 4, 5, today you can say, yeah, right now that order of how we would get there is good, but it's going to come back every single year as discussion as part of the CIP.
So what I'm hearing that it can come back, and at some point in the and it will come back, and at that point we can readjust the phases if necessary.
Right, or you can just push them off too, because you have competing priorities. It's hard even for us to say what might be a priority in San Ramon in 4 years. And so at that point, you would have to then weigh all your options and decide what to fund or not fund. Crow Canyon Gardens, for a little history, there have been a couple of master plans created for the gardens before that didn't come to fruition because as things happened in San Ramon and it grew, the will wasn't there to move forward with them. But I do believe that this plan is probably the most articulated and I think the biggest vision with the most community input into it. So I do feel like it's doable.
Okay, all right, thank you. So from my side, I think we should definitely get ahead with phase 1. That is definitely, I think we should go with that. We have the fund, we didn't, and this is unsafe. So with that, phase 1 and phase 2, definitely from my side, I will go ahead with that. Phase 3, 4, 5, I'm a little hesitant. I want to hear from everybody else on that. That were we, I mean, we can just approve it, but at the same time, we don't know what will going to happen because of the big fund requirement in future on that. So there is an uncertainty as well as the cost uncertainty as well. So
I would agree with you on that, you know, if we are to recommend to defer all the phases, but if we can, it comes back to us that we can revise them. That makes a big difference because 1 and 2 need to start right now. And then, and be assured that we can, you know, revise it at another time because it's in the foreseeable that it's hard to fathom that much money all at once. I mean, that's a lot of excessive
exactly. I was coming to that. If we can go ahead, again, my personal opinion would be go ahead with phase 1, phase 2, approve it on that. And then phase 3, 4, 5, if there is an option to come back and reshuffle needed based on what the situation is, fund-wise, cost-wise, because we will probably get more granular cost, more realistic cost. So on that one side in future, we will probably get a more realistic cost as well as we will know what the development funds coming in on that. So right now it's very difficult for me to make a call on the phase 3, 4, 5, right? But in future, maybe we can come back and answer that.
Sure.
Felix.
No, I was going to say, with the understanding that the further out phases are subject to reevaluation, you know, as the time comes and based on factors that we're going to learn from the earlier phases, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the proposed phasing as presented tonight for the Crow Canyon Garden renovation project. So I'm just going to put that out there right now.
I'll second that.
Hey,
Commissioner King,
just a point.
you have a button for your second.
Right. I'm good. Just a point as we jump into moving that. And I'm kind of with Partha on this, is that I was in the camp of approving phase 1, phase 2 and having the rest of phases come back. as we take a look at spending. I'm fine with approving 1 and 2, but I'd rather have the rest of them come back. So as you make the motion, you just took me out of it. So, I wonder if we could talk out a little bit more about how we want to approve this because of the costs on 3 and 4. Because we know 1 and 2 are really linked together. Because as we think about what Partha said about, hey, as we think about funding, can we separate some of this and phase some of this together? I think it's really intuitive too.
We add to your motion if people approve that, 1 and 2, we approve with the remaining, so that we have a option of considering that at the time when it comes back to us. I don't know how to say
Sure.
that.
The reason why I phrased my motion the way I did is because as Director Hyman said, that evaluation is just built into this process anyway for the future phases. That's not something that we need to specify tonight. Yeah, exactly.
It's built into the CIP process, right?
Correct,
So,
correct.
I think your motion was to, if need be, we can come back and reevaluate phase 3, 4, and 5 at a
Correct.
later date.
Yes.
I
At a
think,
later date.
that's what, if that is part is added, I'm more comfortable to go ahead with that.
Sure. So would you like me to rephrase the motion just
yeah,
for the record?
do that. That'd be great.
All right.
I'm with
Uh,
Partha.
So I'll move to approve the proposed phasing for the Crow Canyon Garden renovation project with the understanding that the phases 3, 4, and 5 are subject to reevaluation as we complete phases 1 and 2.
We're good. We're good.
Yeah, second that. Mhm.
Yep.
So we did just quick question for procedural questions. We did the second. Did we second again or with the amendment?
Yeah, he just
Here got second twice.
Second twice, okay.
Twice this morning.
All right.
Oh, it did.
It is
Well done.
approved. No vote to, what is no vote to? Oh, absent. Absent. Oh, sorry, it took me off from there. All right, thank you.
Good.
All right, good. Good discussion, everybody. And thanks for your time. Thanks for your comment. Thanks for being here. This is a very important decision. Okay, let's moving on to 3.2, Teen Council application and interview process presented by Parks and Community Services Director Kathy Mehiman.
All right, it's that time of year that we need to review and decide how the commission wants to handle the teen council selection process. And to that end, this evening, I'm asking you to review the current teen council application and interview process, recommend any changes if needed, and then select 3 commissioners to read and screen applications and 3 commissioners to conduct interviews. I think most everyone knows the background, but for the benefit of our new commission member, the Teen Council was formally developed in 1994 and has existed for 30 years now. It's made up of 17 local teens and 2 alternates. The Parks Commission job is to screen and interview candidates for the council on an annual basis and then provide the recommendations to City Council, who actually make the appointment. The current system for application, interview, and appointment has worked. It's been adjusted, tweaked, minorly shifted around over the years to address issues as they arise. At one point, the system was created to manage an extremely large number of applications that were being submitted. And at that point, it actually focused more on screening teens out based on errors in the application process than on selecting the best teens for the teen council. And that's when we did a little bit of a course correct. And over the last few years, we've shifted back to content of the applications coupled with the personal interview to make that decision so that we weren't just screening people out for using the wrong font size. The rating of the applicants has been approved over the last few years too, with the addition of a rubric to help score the individual merits of the application. The graph in your staff report shows actually the number of applications received, the number that were screened out, and the number of teens interviewed each year. So you can see that we had 63 applicants last year, 24 were screened out. Actually, 5 of those were late, came in after the deadline, and we conducted 39 interviews. But if you want to look at the whole thing, you can see in 2014-15, that was the year that broke the camel's back with 141 applications. Nobody was screened out, and the commission did 141 interviews.
Wow.
That was crazy. So, so now we've balanced this out a bit. So the current process is staff review the applications for completeness and adherence to the instructions. So not perfection, but the basic instructions. 3 commissioners review the applications using a rubric as a guide and assign a numerical score. The top 39 applicants based on the interview or the review of the applications are invited for oral interview. 3 commissioners conduct 10-minute interviews over the course of 3 nights. We've been doing that via Zoom or Teams. The interview panel then makes a recommendation to the full commission based on the interviews, applications, and scores. So it all comes back to all of you finally to make that final recommendation that goes to the city council, and the city council actually appoints. Those that are disqualified based on initial screening, didn't score high enough for interview or not selected, are given a nice letter thanking them for applying and encouraging them to get involved as potentially an ambassador, since we've got that program. The current process is effective. However, it has been suggested in the past by commissioners that the interviews be conducted over 4 nights. That's one recommendation rather than 3, or that the number of candidates could be brought down for the interviews in order to make the interview portion process more manageable. It's completely in your purview. It is your decision how you want to conduct these interviews. That's part of your task. So the process used to screen the applicants and select candidates is really yours. So we're just looking on direction on the application process and identification of which commissioners are doing which job. In your staff report, you'd see a recruitment timeline. So i.e., if you are going to be out of town during the period of time that we're trying to do the interviews, that's not a good job for you. So you kind of have to look at the calendar and see if that's something you want to jump into. Hand that back off to you, Chair Mitra, to.
Thank you. I did the interviews last time. I think were there 2 other commissioners. I forgot the name. Sorry about that. I think
Listen, Kyle jumped
Yeah,
a lot.
trying
Kyle,
really-
super memorable.
Yeah,
It's trying so hard to remember who were there with me. 39, we did interview, I think 39, that's true. And we did, rather than 4 days, we did in 3 days.
Mhm.
3 days. And I personally felt that was okay. Because it was like 10 minutes and many of the teams just didn't even take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Less than that.
I-
And Kyle, you were there.
I-
Now I remember.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, I'd agree with that as well.
So
Chair
I
Mitra.
think that 39
Mhm.
is not that a big number because we have gone through that. Again, it's just over 3 days. I don't think we even need 4 days. I think 3 days is more than enough to.
If we're keeping it to the same universe of around 39, yeah, I think 3
Yeah,
days is doable. for
Should
sure.
be okay. I mean, that will be my suggestion.
Screen, make sure that you screen somehow.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get 69 or so.
Right. I mean, so I think my suggestion will be, again, this is my suggestion, we'll keep it as is. I don't see any change needed
On the application,
on the application, the number, how many we actually.
let me ask your opinion. Can you do you have any feedback on this whole process? You've done it a couple of years and I kind of personally see duplicate questions on that essays, but I'd love to get your feedback on it.
So I think there's 2 main issues to the application. First, it's always very similar to the year before. So a lot of the current team council members will just copy paste their answers from the year before, apply again, which I think is fine, but also they're basically saying the same things that they want to implement when it's oh, if you've had more time in the team council, you probably have a more wide mindset on what you want to implement or things that you are limited to. So I definitely think maybe tweaking the questions a little bit just so we don't get repeat answers, because I just think that would help us. And then also I definitely recommend adding some type of supplemental to the application, like a video, especially because right now I feel like completing the application is honestly, because of AI, and obviously we know people are going to be using AI, it's you can probably complete the application in less and upwards of 30 minutes, right? So I think having some type of video where people really have to sit down, answer a question will help us make sure that the people who are applying, first of all, are actually interested and really want to do it and aren't just doing it a last minute thing. And also it'll probably help us identify who should move on to the interview round, because I found at least in my school when picking applications and things like that, it's kind of hard to really tell if someone's really passionate about something or to kind of see their personality through an application based process. So having some type of video where we can really see their perspective, I think would be really helpful. And I also think that in the team council, we've seen issues with people who, of course, in the application process are very eager to do things, but when it comes to meetings, we lack participation sometimes. So I think just making sure that we have a robust application to make sure that our applicants are actually like going to be very committed when they do join the council would be helpful. So I think number one, adding some type of supplemental, like a video that I mentioned before, and then also altering the questions a little bit so we're getting new perspectives from our applicants would be very helpful.
Any ideas what questions you would add
I don't know about adding, I would just
or subtract?
change a little bit.
So you're
Yeah,
talking,
like-
I'm sorry, go on. No, no, finish,
Sorry, go
finish
ahead.
it. Okay, you're talking about the video. I think that's an interesting idea. Listening to some of the colleges, both my daughters have applied for the college, just like you. And some of the colleges, they were asking for videos
Yeah.
of that. And I thought that is very interesting if we can implement that. Challenges will be screening, and watching those videos for screening. So that will be a challenge that I
Yeah.
can think, but if we can put a little bit extra effort, probably we will get some perspective on that.
Yeah.
Just wondering when you say that, yes, people, kids, or anybody, when we apply, we say we'll do that, but actual, so when you
Yeah.
go there, we don't see that kind of commitment on that. Again, I'm just opening up anybody on that one. How do you overcome that?
Saying too that we need, especially by screening, we need to know how many attended the meetings. And if there were, some that, like you said, they want to do that, but then when we get to the meetings and all that, we need to know who has really been productive and really attended the meetings and active.
But that is for the existing teen council members.
Yes, with the existing, because some of them are repeating again,
Mhm.
but that's a very helpful thing, because sometimes you get down to 2 or 3. And there's 1 or 2 things maybe that's gonna change your mind.
Maybe is there some data can we pull in from their attendance?
We have pulled it before and we can provide it to the screeners, so they'll have that.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Are we allowed to get Jessica's input on this?
Sorry, what?
Who's the teen council? Is Jessica still doing
Yeah.
Are we allowed to get their input on the
Oh.
application?
Yeah, Jessica's
You
here.
want to give some input on like what you think we should do for,
Mhm.
since you're kind of the lead for the teen council?
And
And
while,
you're
while she,
here?
while she walks up, can I do a couple clarifying questions? So 17 members, right?
2
Do
alternates.
do you have to apply every year? So is there a term limit?
Yeah, there's not a term limit, except for you have to be in high school.
9
The-
through 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the vice chair is a 2-year term that rolls from vice chair to chair.
Okay.
But that's appointed by the city council. You don't have to worry about that piece. And then there's a wait list on there because if some teens miss too many meetings, they get kicked off and the whole
Got
list, the alternates move in and the list moves up.
Okay, so you have to reapply each year
every year.
if you're on the count. Okay, great. And do we promote it through the high schools then, I assume? Okay, thank you. Hi, Jessica.
Yeah, of course. Well, I echo what our student commissioner Chavla has said, just in terms of if there's an opportunity to mix up some of the questions or just so that, or at least when they're going through that interview process, because there are the questions, if you have been on the teen council previously, if you're currently on the teen council, how have you been involved? We know that as, Chair Chavla had said, Teen Chair Chavla had said, the students are using AI. And so, in those processes, you can kind of get a sense for when they just want to update their resume, be able to put that on there. So we are looking for those students that have excellent attendance. We understand that things come up, but yes, we're happy to provide that to you. The attendance logs, their volunteer hours, making sure that they're staying top of all of those things. Because we have had students that have been on, you've been on since you were freshman, correct? Longer than I've been working with the teen council, right? And so, but because she's come and had good attendance and, done all of her volunteer things, and she's now moved up and she's our chair. So it's not to say that kids can't come back and do a great job, but we do want to make sure that in the screening process, that they're choosing those best applicants. As far as the interview process goes, I think, if the format that you have right now is working, then that's that's great. I don't know how feasible the video presentation would be, but that could be another element. Something that we've done for our summer staff hiring, we do group interviews, and it's just another way to kind of see how they interact with individuals, how they work in a team, rather than just having their practiced pat answers. So.
Jessica, do we secure a number of spots for freshmen? Like, are there a certain amount of spots that we say we want to make sure that we have freshman representation, or?
I believe
No.
it's just best qualified through the rating process. Yeah, as recommended by you all. We do our best too as well to use obviously our current teen council to push the word out to other students who may be coming up that want to apply at their schools. Doherty Valley is highly represented. Cal High is decently well represented. This year we do have a student from the Athenian School, which is our first time for that. And we have for the second year in a row, a student from Quarry Lane. And so we're continuing to try to work with those students as well to make sure that we get more applicants, more from diverse, I guess, schools.
Commissioner Levy?
Sure. I had an idea that I guess I'll put on the table kind of as the student commissioner and Jessica were kind of talking about the need to kind of worry about AIs for the application and attendance and participation when someone actually gets on the teen council. I know the virtual interviews are certainly more convenient for everyone. They're definitely more convenient for me, but I wonder if it would be better to conduct in-person interviews. And the reason why I suggest that is because, again, the meetings are in person. These are the students are representing a body of the city. They need to interact in the public. They need to be able to present themselves well. And it's also good experience. It's sort of like a mock job interview to help get them kind of in that mindset of meeting and interacting with adults. I mean, when I served on the teen council, Commissioner Lopez Lucy interviewed me in that in the community center along with the late Commissioner Ernest. And 20 years later, I remember it very, very clearly. It made an impression. So I would suggest that we consider doing in-person interviews, which will help at least address some of these concerns, not all of them, but it's doable in the time that we have before we kind of have to get things rolling. So that's what I would put on the table.
Okay.
To answer one of the questions, if do you count on have freshmen? I know that screening and by working with the two other screeners, we've always tried to make sure that we do have some seniors, but we try awfully hard not to get overly burdened with them because they're not going to be around the next year. So you really want to focus on all levels, but you want to be sure you don't get overburdened with the seniors, because that can cause a problem there too, that you lose most of your leadership.
Right.
And you're starting anew, but you need some carryover to help keep the next year going strong. So, and I'm sure from last year, we did select some freshmen, and also there was an 8th grader who put in an application because he or she would have been a freshman
Right.
when they started the year. So you try to mix it up so you have a good variety of people,
Yeah.
not just from one class.
Great. So that's just part of the process. I mean, we
Right.
just, there's just
when
kind
you're
of that
going through the
unwritten
screen-
understanding, right? That we want good balance.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
balance. So,
Got it.
because you know what year they're going to be in, because that
Got it.
tells in their
Yeah.
application.
Okay, good point. All right, so, okay. Any other comment? Anybody? Yeah, please.
How's with that number like selected? Is that like something we publish to the teen council? Like, we'll pick 39 people for an interview, or is it kind of like what we have decided as a body?
It's the Parks Commission's decision.
Okay.
That's how that one year we did 161 interviews. So it was a balancer. That was
Okay.
what could fit on 3 nights.
Okay.
But it is just a decision. I know one year I think we did do 40 because we had somebody that tied on the scoring.
Yeah.
So that can become, so I think there's a little wiggle room in there.
Okay. And then also, just a suggestion, I think we should add all the teen council meeting dates on the application, because just as a way for them to have accountability, here are all the dates for next year. You're
Good idea.
required to.
Yeah,
attend
that's a good idea.
That's a good point.
I think we should add that
Is that doable?
to make sure that they're available.
It's not doable. There are a couple dates that generally around November and December sometimes shift, and they vote on when we're shifting those dates. And so we wouldn't have those dates determined, but for the rest of them, for the most part, they're third Tuesdays. I do believe it is in the application as well. One of the questions says, are you available on third Tuesdays from 6:30
It
to
does.
8:30?
Okay,
So.
it does. Okay. There you go. Covered then. Any other comment from anybody?
Yeah, just one, I
Yeah,
know
please.
that it's random, and thanks for hanging with me, I've been random questions, but it's just, I just think this process needs to be redone, to be frank with you. And I've gone through screening 2 years in a row, Carol and I did it last year together, and then doing interviewing. And, you know, I'm with Kyle since he's doing the personal interview, and how do we, I've been in teen council meetings where half of them participate, the other half are, I don't know what they're doing, but I feel bad for when you lead them that no one's really participating the way we want to. So, and I don't know how to solve that issue because they all want to be involved. So, but maybe it's how we're interviewing. Are we missing something? So, I think we asked too many essay questions. I personally like to eliminate 1 or 2 essay questions and kind of change the essay question. But I do like, do we have the capacity to do a video?
This is a really great question. It's such an amazingly great idea.
Yeah.
But my timeline starts us on January 29th and
Saw that.
22nd. So I'm not sure that's something we could actually achieve and still keep the timeline to catch the city council meeting we need to catch to add the video component. We can definitely take a quick look and see if there's an easy solution, but that may be a long-term great suggestion that we pick up next year.
I'm with you.
However, the in-person interviews, if you want to change the questions, you can either assign commissioners to do that, to change the questions and give them to us. We can make that happen. If you want to assign staff to go ahead and tweak them a little bit, we could do that as well, but we just need direction.
I mean, here's what I would do is I'd say I kind of like having rotating different questions on it. So here's what I think. I think we don't do live this year video, but see if we can pass it to do it later on, right? To give staff time to go do that. And then we figure out what that works. But then I would like to rotate the questions and really ask ourselves, just because I don't know how you feel, Carol, but reading all the essays, it's just a lot and it's duplicate. So how do we make sure we're asking maybe 2 or 3 really solid essay questions and, whatever that may be, that, because there was duplication on it. So, and then we just do in person.
And a lot of time, yeah, in their essays or something, and they put in there, what have you volunteered for? It sort of makes a difference if they have volunteered in the community and got out into the community versus if they've just done it and very well start at 501c3 themselves for something. But I think it makes a difference if they get out into the community that we can see that they're involved more so maybe. I mean, I'm not degrading anything that they do, but it does make a difference if they get out in the community and are making a difference in the community. I mean, they're making a difference, but we can't see the actual results of it, of working with them in the community.
And then, hey, thank you. And the other thing I'd add, Julie created a really cool rubric / when we entered in all our scores. So if we get what Julie did, it would really help as we're doing the reading so that we're not recreating it. She actually did a really nice job being our lead with that. So
Yeah,
anyway, so
that's an easy thing to do.
yeah, just make sure we're consistent. So, and so my recommendation is look at video, do it next year, rotate the questions to in-person interview. So that's what I would add into that.
For the interview, do you have any applicant specific questions based on the written application, or is it all centralized questions that we ask at?
I think with standard
Then,
questions
yeah,
because
that's better for a good session.
Is it possible to have any application specific?
we'd have to, if there's a legal thing, right, with that.
Those questions all have to be, so I mean, the questions have to be the same for everybody on the application.
Okay.
So,
for the interview, we couldn't be in your application, you wrote about this activity, how do you think you can implement something like that?
on the interview, you potentially could, but I think general best practices with interviews and when you're to weighing people against each
Yeah.
other is to ask a very similar question.
Right.
So that everybody has the same opportunity to answer it.
But I think potentially within that, if it's not already on there. It is nice to get follow-up on because should already be, that's one of the application questions is talk about, how you've served the community or been involved. And so that could just be a standardized question is, tell us more about what you said on your application in regards to your community service or something like that. So you could standardize it in that way and then people hopefully talk more about it there.
That'd be a good question for interviewing.
Mhm.
So we heard, so we'll have staff, if we could have staff do questions, I'm just kind of want to paintball up, maybe, and I'm happy to give input if you want to do it. So we'll have staff do some rotating questions. We'll do interviews in person, that's what we're trying to see, and then look in the future and possibly do it as a video. Any other changes?
I love your ideas. I think they're terrific. I think you're absolutely right on when it comes to AI. I mean, and not 30 minutes. They can do this in 30 seconds. It's that quick, especially, for kids who have already kind of gone through the college application process and stuff. And a lot of it just becomes kind of recycling and repetition and stuff. So any way that we can try and add some, I don't know, human element to it, I guess, right? That allows for us to really kind of through that application, through the written word, be able to kind of glean, the type of students we're getting here, I think would be helpful. I don't have an answer to it, but it's a challenge. It's a huge one. And so I love the idea of a video. If there's not enough time, then maybe we could think about it next time. And I just assume that it was in person. So we've been doing it via Zoom, I guess. So yeah, I love Kyle's idea of doing it in person. You just, you get to see a person's true character. So, yep. Mhm.
Okay, so what I think so far I hear you saying is we'd have staff go ahead and write the questions. You're okay with that if we mix it up on the application and the interview questions come up with, those we have a little more time on, but the application's got to get out. So if you're okay with us doing that and you have faith, we can make that happen.
One other, real quick, because, and Jessica, I love the fact that we had a student from Athenian and from
Corey Lane.
Corey Lane. I know there are also a lot of kids that attend De La Salle and Carondelet in our community too. So if there's anything that we can do to kind of extend the outreach to other private schools, I think would be great.
So we'll write the questions, we'll plan for personal interviews, and we're do a little more outreach. We've got some time on that. So, and then that video idea, which is just so great, we'll really pursue for next year to see if we can figure that out. That'll give us a little more time on that. And so then the last thing I need to know which three are interviewing and which three are screening, because that always becomes our biggest challenge. So.
So the interviews are weekdays, weekends?
The dates you put for interviews has weekends and weekdays in there.
There's 9 days to choose
Yep.
from, so you'd need to pick 3 days in that. Normally, we've done them weekday evenings, and that's just because that's when we had availability. We had to have staff running your Zoom kind of a thing. In person, slightly different, so you could look at it differently. If you didn't want to do evenings, you could probably go to a weekend, but we'd like to put the interview dates ideally on the application process if we can, because it just is easier for everyone to plan.
I will do either. So right now I don't have to travel. So thank you for making the travel out. So just let me know.
I can do that too.
I would love to do interviews. I prefer that, but
No, I think Partha and Commissioner Breed said they would do either.
Gumby.
Commissioner
I could
Caney,
do,
Commissioner Gainey said he'd like to do interviews, and we do know that Commissioner Osland, who's sick this evening, expressed that she couldn't do the screening because she'll be traveling, so she would prefer to
Okay, I
do
just texted her.
interviews.
Okay.
So that would put, if this all works out, Commissioner Caney and Commissioner Osland on interviews. So we need one more interviewer.
An interview, yeah.
I'll do interview.
And then that would be Commissioner Breed, which would then put on screening
I could do screening. I was going to volunteer to do interviews just because I felt bad suggesting making it harder on all of us by doing in person and then not raising my hand. But if you guys are willing to do it, great. I could do screening.
Okay.
So we have 3 interviews and 3 screening, right?
Well, I'm just getting on the,
Yeah, I was coming to Will because I saw Will, he said he is also available if needed.
yeah, he would do either.
Either, yes.
He likes interviewing.
But he's done it always. It'd be good for him to do a screening once. I'm sorry.
Sure, it's work. You and I did a lot of work on that last year, I agree.
All right, so do you have what you need?
No, I still don't.
Thanks, Jessica.
Honestly,
Thanks, Jessica.
it's your decision. So
Okay,
I've got Commissioner Breed, Commissioner Osland, and Commissioner Caney on interviews, and I've got Commissioner Levy on screening. So,
I can do screening.
okay,
there you go.
and I need one more.
Will,
Will.
Okay,
well, Will would love to do it.
okay,
So
perfect.
can-
Now I
can-
have what I need.
Can we just read out the names again? Who is doing what?
Yes, so on the screening, we would have Commissioner Levy, Commissioner Lopez Lucy, and Commissioner Dorlick. And then for the interviews, we would have Commissioner Breed, Commissioner Osland, and Commissioner Caney.
Okay.
So then would Steve and Julia and I need to get together to decide on the 3 days, or?
Yeah, so our clerk, Kathy Schiller, would be reaching out to try and figure out what 3 days or what time frame we need to do that on. Because you don't have Commissioner Osland here, you can't really just talk about it now,
Right.
sort it out, but.
We do that sooner than later then.
Yeah.
Block out my calendar. Thanks, Kath.
Absolutely. And then the same thing happens with the screeners. Once we get the binders and the applications, the screeners usually meet to go through and talk about how they're going to do it and how the rubric works. And then they get back together at the end too, I believe. You can answer that better for me though.
Well, I don't think we've gotten together maybe first, but we always get together at the end
Yeah.
We got to do
to
that.
make sure that we're all pretty much,
Aligned.
it usually comes pretty much in line. But you really have to do screening because you can't, everyone, a lot of them you can say, oh, this is really good. It's really, I go through it and then I go through it again. I mean, so that I make sure that I have not missed something or whatever.
Yeah, we usually, I believe we broke it. Now I'm trying to remember, we broke up the applications, so you all each had 20 or so. to do.
Yes, that makes it so much easier
It's
than
really good, yeah.
than reading them all. It
Oh, that's
just
good.
pretty
Yeah.
soon, because you can only read so many at a time because you gotta
Yeah.
get out and have a breath from it and then go back and be fresh again.
I see our team.
Alright, I just have a few questions. So if you are splitting up the applications, how are you making sure that it's all evaluated fairly? Because of course, we all have different perspectives. So I'm just wondering on that.
That's the rubric. So there's a rubric. If you look in the staff report, you actually
Yeah.
could see it. So that's why usually they have at least a conversation at the beginning about how they're scoring on the rubric. Because you're right, if somebody is a real high scorer versus a low scorer. So the 3 commissioners doing the screening need to be agreed that, okay, this is how we see the highest one, how they're doing those numbers. And then they get back together at the end so that they can kind of look at it in ranked order. So if you ranked, everybody has their top 10 and how those come together. And then some adjustment has to be made sometimes at that point in time because it's hard to have different.
That
viewpoints.
is.
So it's not an
And
average.
you try to have some female and some male so that you just don't have all, overburdened, but kind of have it so that it's,
And a suggestion that this is just a process I've followed in the past is you may want to have like 3 examples, one that's a stellar application, one that's not so stellar, one that's a poor application, and then they calibrate the people who screen can calibrate so they can say, oh yeah, we're in agreement that that is a 4.5 or this one's a 3, whatever. And then you kind of get a feel for what the expectations are going in, and I think it helps with your question a little bit.
I don't know that that would be the right thing to do because you are the team chair and you know the candidates. So there could be a perception of an unfair bias because they know you. So I appreciate it and it would be interesting, I'm sure, but I don't know if that's
Okay, not like to ask questions or anything, just to observe, like for my own sake, but I totally understand if that's not
Yeah,
possible.
I can compare that to like in our federation, that a president can't sit on a nominating committee. Even though she doesn't have any right to speak, she's there, and there's sometimes you get along and sometimes you don't, and that makes a big difference. Whether somebody will accept it or feel that they're being discriminated against.
It's probably a perception thing.
Also, as a process, it would be important that before they start screening, get Jessica's data before, which would be really helpful.
Got it.
Any other comment, anybody? before
I
we
think
action?
technically you need to open it for public comment, just as an FYI.
Okay, all right. Do we have any public comment? Okay, all right. All right, any other comment, just to close it? No?
Oh, yes, I do have a
Okay.
comment, but not on that, just a basic comment when we're on screening and whatever. But we do have the teen job fair that is Saturday, March 1. And it's very helpful if we have some commissioners that would be willing to do mock interviews,
Is that Saturday, what, March 1st?
March 1st. And it starts at 12:30 to 3.
All right. With that, we are adjourning the meeting today, the special meeting on January 22nd at 9:17 PM. Thank you, everybody. Good night.